I've kept this secret for 41 years. What happened in Galena Ridge, Idaho in the summer of 1983 destroyed friendships, ended lives, and revealed something about human nature that still keeps me awake at night. When silver hit $50 an ounce that June, decent people became monsters. And the creature we hunted? It turned out to be more human than any of us. My name is Thomas Edward Mercer. I was 34 years old, a geological surveyor for the Bureau of Land Management. And I'm the only person still alive who knows what really happened to the 11 men who went looking for Bigfoot's secret silver mine. To understand how everything fell apart, you first need to understand Galena Ridge. Population 847 souls, nestled deep in the Clearwater Mountains of northern Idaho. The town clung to existence the way lichen clings to stone, stubborn and weathered and refusing to let go. In 1983, Reagan was in the White House. The economy was sputtering through recession, and small towns like Galena Ridge were bleeding out slowly, one lost job at a time. The town had a history though, a proud history written in silver. Back in the 1880s, prospectors flooded these mountains chasing dreams of fortune. Galena Ridge sprang up overnight, a collection of tents and timber buildings serving the men who pulled wealth from the earth. At its peak, 3,000 people called this place home. The mines produced millions in silver ore, and for a brief shining moment, Galena Ridge mattered to the wider world. But silver is a fickle mistress. By the 1920s, most of the mines had played out. The veins ran dry, the easy ore vanished, and one by one, the mining operations shuttered their gates. The population dwindled to those too stubborn or too poor to leave. The town survived on logging and hunting tourism, families passing down their stubbornness from generation to generation like a genetic trait. I arrived in Galena Ridge in the spring of 1981, fresh from my geology degree at the University of Idaho, assigned to the Northern Idaho District of the Bureau of Land Management. My job was straightforward enough. Map federal lands, assess mineral rights, file reports that nobody in Washington would ever read. I rented a small cabin 3 miles outside town, drove a beat-up 1978 Ford pickup truck, and kept mostly to myself. The locals tolerated me. They were polite in that careful way small-town people are polite to outsiders, always watching, always measuring. I understood. I was government, and government had never done much good for places like Galena Ridge. I respected their distance and tried to earn their trust slowly, through small gestures and quiet reliability. The town itself had a certain charm, if you knew how to look for it. Hannigan's General Store sat at the main crossroads, its wooden porch sagging under decades of boot traffic. Margaret Hannigan knew everyone's business and dispensed gossip along with groceries with equal measure. The Nugget Bar occupied a converted assay office from the mining days, its walls decorated with rusted equipment and faded photographs of bearded men who died before any of us were born. First Methodist Church held services every Sunday, its white steeple visible from every point in town, a reminder that some things endured even when silver didn't. But beneath the small-town pleasantries I sensed something else. Desperation. The lumber mill had cut shifts twice that spring. Men who'd worked 40 hours a week now struggled to get 20. Property taxes came due regardless of employment, and families who'd held their land for 4 generations faced the unthinkable prospect of losing everything. Old-timers gathered at the Nugget Bar and talked about the glory days, their eyes going distant with memory and regret. They told stories of strikes and fortunes, of men who'd walked into these mountains poor and walked out wealthy beyond imagination. Those stories were the town's mythology, its collective dream of what once was and might somehow be again. Then in the spring of 1983, that dream started looking possible again. Silver prices had been climbing for months. Economic uncertainty always drives people toward precious metals, and the early 80s provided uncertainty in abundance. But in June, something changed. The price didn't just climb, it exploded. $12 an ounce became $20, $20 became $30. By the third week of June, silver touched $47, and Galena Ridge lost its collective mind. You have to understand what those numbers meant to people who remembered the mining days. At $47 an ounce, even a modest silver deposit became worth pursuing. The old mines, long abandoned, suddenly represented potential fortune. Men pulled dusty mining claim maps from attic trunks and basement boxes. They pored over documents their grandfathers had filed, searching for any scrap of land that might hold forgotten wealth. And that's when people started talking about Elijah Harrison. The Harrison silver strike of 1891 was legendary in these parts, though I'd never heard of it before arriving in Galena Ridge. The story went like this. Elijah Harrison was a prospector, one of thousands who'd wandered these mountains hoping to strike it rich. Unlike most, Harrison actually found something. According to the legend, he stumbled onto the richest silver vein anyone had ever seen. Pure ore running thick as a man's arm through virgin rock, enough silver to make a dozen men wealthy for life. But the discovery came with a peculiar detail. Harrison claimed he'd followed a creature to find the deposit. A giant wild man, he called it, covered in dark hair, standing 8 feet tall if it stood an inch. The creature led him through a hidden canyon to a valley nobody had ever seen before, and there, in that secret place, Harrison found his silver. He filed a claim at the county courthouse, legal and proper. But before he could work the mine, before he could extract a single ounce of ore, Elijah Harrison died. The official cause was exposure, found frozen in the mountains during an early winter storm, but whispers suggested otherwise. Some said he was murdered for his claim, others said the creature killed him for trespassing on sacred ground. The truth died with Harrison, and his maps and claim documents vanished, reportedly buried with him in an unmarked grave somewhere in those endless mountains. For 92 years, the Harrison silver strike remained a legend, a campfire story, something old men talked about when the whiskey flowed freely and the night grew long. Nobody took it seriously, until people started seeing things in the woods. The first report came in May 1983, a few weeks before silver prices went crazy. Carl Dupree, a logger who'd worked these forests for 30 years, came into the nugget bar white-faced and shaking. He'd been marking trees near Bitter Creek when he saw something huge, moving through the underbrush with impossible grace for its size. He said it stood upright, like a man, but it wasn't any man. Carl was a practical fellow, not given to fantasy. When pressed, he admitted it might have been a bear, a very large bear walking oddly. The men at the bar nodded and bought him drinks and told him to lay off the homemade moonshine. But then came the second sighting. 2 teenage boys camping with their scout troop reported seeing a creature near their tents after midnight. 8 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown hair, watching them from the tree line. The scoutmaster dismissed it as overactive imagination combined with too many horror movies. The boys insisted. They hadn't imagined anything. They knew what they saw. The third sighting changed everything. Reverend William Emery, pastor of First Methodist Church for 23 years, was driving home late after visiting a sick parishioner. A creature crossed the road in front of his headlights. He described it clearly, precisely, with the careful accuracy of a man trained to observe and report. 8 feet tall, massive shoulders, reddish hair covering its entire body. It turned and looked at him, and in that moment, the Reverend said, he saw intelligence in those eyes. Then it vanished into the darkness. Nobody called the Reverend a drunk or a fantasist. William Emery was the most respected man in Galena Ridge. If he said he saw something, he saw something. Suddenly people remembered the Harrison legend, a giant wild man covered in hair, a creature guarding a secret silver mine, and now with silver worth $47 an ounce, that old story took on new significance. I watched this transformation with professional detachment at first. Mass hysteria, I told myself. Economic anxiety manifesting as shared delusion. People see what they want to see, especially when fortune hangs in the balance. But the scientist in me couldn't completely dismiss the reports. 3 independent sightings from credible witnesses suggested something worth investigating. Not necessarily Bigfoot, of course. Perhaps an unusually large bear, maybe a hermit living rough in the mountains. Something real that people were misinterpreting through the lens of legend. What truly captured my attention wasn't the creature sightings. It was the historical records. As a surveyor, I had access to county archives that most civilians never saw. I began researching Elijah Harrison's documented mining claims, curious whether the legend had any factual foundation. What I found disturbed me. Harrison had indeed filed claims in 1891. County records showed the paperwork clearly, his signature preserved on yellowed documents, but the specific claim locations were missing. Entire pages had been removed from the record books, cut out cleanly with a blade. Someone had systematically erased the precise coordinates of Harrison's discovery, and they'd done it decades ago, judging by the aged condition of the remaining pages. Records don't disappear by accident. Someone had wanted Harrison's secret to stay buried. Someone with access to the county courthouse. Someone with authority and purpose. The question was why. And the deeper question, the one that kept me awake at night, was who. By late June, Galena Ridge had transformed into something I barely recognized. Men quit their jobs at the lumber mill to search the mountains full-time. The Historical Society, a small room in the back of the library, was ransacked by treasure hunters looking for old maps. Families sold furniture, sold vehicles, sold anything they could spare to buy prospecting equipment. Metal detectors became more valuable than gold. Outside speculators arrived daily, men in expensive suits offering cash for land purchases, no questions asked. They bought property sight unseen, gambling that somewhere beneath that rocky soil lay silver waiting to be claimed. The locals viewed them with suspicion and resentment, but they took their money nonetheless. What choice did they have? I watched Dale Whitmore lead the charge into madness. Dale owned the hardware store, served on the town council, and carried himself with the easy authority of a man who'd never questioned his place in the world. 52 years old, respected by everyone, Dale organized the first official search party with the efficiency of a military commander. 20 men hiked into the Clearwater wilderness that June, equipped with supplies Dale provided at cost from his own inventory. They found nothing, but they came back with stories, strange sounds at night, footprints in soft earth impossibly large, the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. Dale declared the first expedition a reconnaissance mission and immediately began planning a second, larger effort. What nobody knew, what I only discovered years later, was that Dale Whitmore was drowning in gambling debts. He owed money to dangerous men in Boise, men who didn't accept excuses or payment plans. The land Dale owned bordered federal holdings. If silver existed anywhere nearby, Dale's property values would explode overnight. His debts would vanish. His reputation would be saved. Dale Whitmore wasn't searching for Bigfoot's silver mine out of adventure or curiosity. He was searching out of desperation. Desperation has a particular scent to it, a kind of fear that seeps through even the most confident exterior. And in Galena Ridge during that fevered summer, desperation hung in the air like morning fog, clinging to everyone it touched. Vernon Skaggs carried a different kind of desperation altogether. At 38 years old, Vernon had seen things in the jungles of Vietnam that had hollowed out something essential inside him. He worked part-time at the auto repair shop on Main Street, but most days you could find him at the Nugget Bar by 2 in the afternoon, nursing whiskey and nursing old wounds that never quite healed. The other veterans in town gave Vernon a wide berth. They recognized something in his eyes, something unstable, something that could ignite without warning. But Vernon believed. That was the thing about him that separated Vernon from the other desperate men gathering their equipment and maps. Vernon Skaggs had seen things that defied explanation, things that the military never acknowledged, things that taught him the universe contained mysteries far stranger than anything the rational mind wanted to accept. When people talked about a giant creature roaming the Clearwater wilderness, Vernon didn't laugh. Vernon listened. And when the sightings multiplied and the silver prices climbed, Vernon saw an opportunity to finally prove that the impossible was real, that his nightmares had validity, that he wasn't crazy after all. He wanted proof. He wanted vindication, and he wanted the payoff that would come with both. Then there were the Finch brothers, Ray and Bobby, unemployed loggers whose lives had crumbled when the lumber mill cut their shifts to nothing. Ray was 28, sharp as a hunting knife and twice as dangerous. He had ambitions that extended far beyond the borders of Galena Ridge, dreams of escape that grew more urgent with every passing month of poverty. Bobby, 4 years younger, was what the kind folks in town called simple. He followed his older brother with absolute loyalty, incapable of questioning Ray's judgment, incapable of recognizing when Ray's schemes crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed. Ray Finch looked at the silver frenzy and saw his ticket out of a life he despised. He didn't care about Bigfoot. He didn't care about legends or mysteries or the truth. Ray cared about money, about freedom, about never again watching his mother count pennies at the grocery store while neighbors pretended not to notice. If finding some mythical silver mine required hunting down a monster, Ray would hunt. If it required violence, Ray would deliver violence. There was a coldness in Ray Finch that troubled me even then, a willingness to do whatever the situation demanded without the inconvenience of conscience. Benjamin Cross represented something different entirely. At 71, the retired schoolteacher had spent decades researching the Harrison legend, poring over old newspapers, interviewing elderly residents, piecing together fragments of a story that everyone else dismissed as folklore. Benjamin knew things. He knew things he rarely shared, things that made him cautious when others grew reckless. 2 days before the June 17th expedition departed, Benjamin Cross found me outside the post office and pulled me aside with a grip surprisingly strong for a man his age. "Mr. Mercer," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you seem like a sensible man, a scientific man. May I offer you some advice?" I told him I was always open to wisdom from those who had more experience than I did. Benjamin's eyes darted around the street, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. Some things are hidden for good reasons. Elijah Harrison was not a foolish man, and he was not a greedy man. Whatever he found in those mountains, he chose to protect it rather than profit from it. He died for that choice. I've spent 30 years trying to understand why, and I believe I've finally pieced it together. He pressed a folded paper into my hand. "Read this when you're alone, and ask yourself whether the truth is worth what it might cost." Before I could respond, Benjamin Cross shuffled away, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, in my rented cabin, I unfolded the paper and found a hand-drawn map marked with symbols I didn't recognize and a single sentence written in Benjamin's careful script. Harrison found what he was looking for. He just discovered it wasn't silver. I should have paid more attention to that warning. I should have listened to the fear in an old man's voice. But I was 34 years old and trained in the scientific method, and I believed that investigation and observation could illuminate any mystery. I had no idea how wrong I was about to be proven. June 17th dawned cool and misty, the kind of morning that made the Clearwater Mountains look like something from a fever dream. 8 of us gathered at the trailhead where Forest Service Road 411 dead-ended into wilderness. Dale Whitmore had organized everything with military precision, assigning roles and distributing equipment as though we were mounting a professional expedition rather than a glorified treasure hunt. Besides Dale and myself, our party included Vernon Skaggs with his hunting rifle and his haunted eyes, both Finch brothers, and 3 other men whose names I've chosen to omit because their families don't deserve the association with what eventually happened. We carried metal detectors, surveying tools, camping supplies for 3 days, enough weapons to fight a small war, and enough hope to fuel a dozen expeditions. The forest swallowed us within the first mile. That's the only way to describe how it felt, being swallowed, consumed by something ancient and indifferent to our presence. The trees rose around us like cathedral columns, blocking out most of the morning light, reducing our world to a narrow tunnel of green and shadow. The trail we followed was old, barely visible in places, marked by blazes on tree trunks that someone had carved generations before any of us were born. I noticed those blazes immediately. Noticed how they formed a deliberate pattern, a path that wound through the densest parts of the forest rather than taking the easier routes along ridgelines and waterways. Whoever had marked this trail wanted to remain hidden. They wanted to travel unseen. The geological surveyor in me filed this observation away while the man in me felt the first stirrings of unease. It was Ray Finch who first commented on the silence. "Where are all the birds?" he asked, and suddenly the rest of us became aware of what our subconscious minds had already registered. No birdsong, no squirrel chatter, no buzzing insects. The forest around us had fallen absolutely unnaturally silent, as though every living creature had fled or frozen at our approach. Vernon's hand moved to his rifle. "Something's watching us," he said, and for once his paranoia seemed entirely justified. We pressed on anyway. We had come too far to turn back at the first sign of strangeness, and besides, each man carried his own burden of desperation that outweighed fear. The silence followed us deeper into the wilderness, a silence so complete that the sound of our own breathing became oppressive. Around midday we discovered the cabin. It sat in a small clearing, half consumed by decades of undergrowth, its roof caved in on one side and its door hanging from a single rusted hinge. The logs that formed its walls had turned gray with age, weathered and cracked, but the craftsmanship was evident even after all those years. Someone had built this cabin to last, had intended it as a permanent dwelling rather than a temporary shelter. Dale Whitmore's face lit up when he saw it. "This could be Harrison's base camp," he said, already pushing through the waist-high ferns toward the structure. "The record said he worked these mountains for 3 years before he died. He must have lived somewhere." We followed Dale inside, stepping carefully over the rotted floorboards, ducking beneath sagging beams. The cabin's interior had been thoroughly ransacked at some point in the distant past. Broken furniture lay scattered in the corners, rusted tools protruded from piles of debris, and the stone fireplace was choked with generations of animal nests. But in the far corner, beneath a collapsed section of roof, I spotted something that made my breath catch in my throat. A strong box, its iron surface orange with rust but still intact, lay half buried in the accumulated dirt. Dale saw it at the same moment I did, and we both scrambled toward it with an eagerness that embarrassed me even then. The lock had corroded into uselessness, and the lid came away with a screech of protesting metal. The strong box was empty, or almost empty. At the bottom, protected by the iron walls from the decades of moisture and decay, lay a few torn pages from what had once been a journal. The handwriting was faded, nearly illegible in places, but I could make out fragments of sentences, pieces of thoughts from a man dead for nearly a century. "The creature watches but does not harm," one passage read. "It guards something precious, not silver, something else." Another fragment, barely visible. "I have been wrong about everything. The Lord has shown me a different path, but I fear what men will do if they learn the truth." And finally, in letters that seemed to grow more urgent, more hurried, "They are not animals. They remember. They have always remembered, and now I understand why they must be protected at any cost." Vernon Skaggs grabbed the pages from my hand, squinting at the faded writing. "Protected from what?" he demanded. What the hell was Harrison hiding? I had no answer for him then, but I was beginning to formulate theories that troubled me, theories that contradicted everything I thought I knew about this expedition and its true purpose. That night we made camp in a clearing about 100 yards from the cabin. No one wanted to sleep inside those rotting walls, and the open ground felt marginally safer, though I couldn't have explained why. We built a fire larger than necessary, took comfort in the light and heat, and tried to convince ourselves that the day's discoveries represented progress toward our goal. Vernon took first watch while the rest of us settled into our sleeping bags. I lay awake for hours, staring at the stars visible through gaps in the forest canopy, turning those journal fragments over in my mind. "The creature watches but does not harm. It guards something precious, not silver, something else." What had Elijah Harrison found in these mountains? What had transformed him from a prospector seeking wealth into a guardian seeking protection? And what did any of this have to do with the Bigfoot sightings that had sent our town into a frenzy of greed? I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep around midnight, lulled by the crackling fire and the rhythm of Vernon's pacing footsteps. I awoke to the sound of wood striking wood. The fire had burned down to embers, casting barely enough light to see the shapes of my companions in their sleeping bags. Vernon stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, his rifle raised, his entire body rigid with tension. The sound came again, a deep resonant knock, like someone striking a tree trunk with a massive club. Then another, from a different direction. Then another, then another. The knocking surrounded us. We were surrounded by something we couldn't see, something that communicated in a language of percussion and silence. The knocking wasn't random. Even in my fear, my analytical mind recognized the pattern. A knock from the north would be answered by 2 from the east. 3 quick strikes from the south would prompt a single resonant boom from somewhere above us, up in the ridgeline. They were talking to each other, about us. Vernon opened fire. The muzzle flash blinded me momentarily, and the crack of the rifle shattered the night. Men scrambled from their sleeping bags, fumbling for weapons, shouting questions that nobody could answer. Vernon kept shooting, emptying his magazine into the darkness, screaming obscenities that echoed off the canyon walls. Then silence. Complete and absolute silence. The knocking stopped. The forest held its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if nature itself was waiting to see what would happen next. For a long moment nothing moved. Then we heard it, the sound of something massive retreating through the underbrush, not running, not fleeing in panic, walking deliberately. As if whatever was out there wanted us to know it was leaving on its own terms, not because we had frightened it away, Nobody slept the rest of that night. We sat in a tight circle around the rebuilt fire, rifles across our laps, watching the tree line until dawn painted the sky in shades of salmon and gold. When the light was strong enough to see, we found the tracks, 18 inches long, pressed deep into the soft earth. They circled our entire camp, some coming within feet of where we had been sleeping. I knelt beside one of the clearest prints, my geological training taking over despite my fear. I measured the depth, calculated the weight distribution, factored in the soil composition. Whatever made these tracks weighed at least 600 pounds, probably more, and it walked on 2 legs. The tracks led away toward Bitter Creek Canyon, a narrow gap in the mountains that local hunters had always avoided. Old-timers said the hunting was bad there, that game animals wouldn't enter the canyon. Now I understood why. The group split along predictable lines. Dale wanted to follow the tracks to see where they led. Frank Castellano and Marcus Webb wanted to return to town immediately. Vernon, still wild-eyed from his nighttime shooting spree, demanded we pursue and kill whatever had stalked us. Dr. Hennigan, ever the scientist, wanted to collect plaster casts of the footprints. Charlie Proudfoot said nothing. He simply stared at the tracks, his weathered face unreadable, his eyes carrying a weight that suggested he knew more than he was willing to share. In the end, we split up. 4 men, the cautious ones, headed back toward Galena Ridge. The rest of us followed the tracks toward Bitter Creek Canyon. I should have gone back. I should have listened to the voice in my head that screamed warnings about what we were walking toward. But scientific curiosity, that blessing and curse of every researcher, drove me forward. I had to know. I had to understand. The canyon entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 men to walk abreast. The walls rose steep on either side, dark rock streaked with mineral deposits that caught the morning light. As we passed through that gap, the temperature dropped noticeably. The air smelled different here, cleaner somehow, ancient. And then the canyon opened into something impossible. A hidden valley spread before us, perhaps 2 miles across, ringed by sheer cliffs that would be invisible from any normal vantage point. A crystal-clear stream wound through meadows of wildflowers. Stands of old-growth timber, trees that had never known a logger's axe, dotted the landscape. It was pristine in a way that modern America simply wasn't anymore. We stood in stunned silence, 8 men confronting a pocket of wilderness that time had forgotten. That's when I saw it. Him. Coda, though I didn't know to call him that yet. He stood at the tree line across the meadow, massive and still, watching us with eyes that held an intelligence I couldn't deny. Reddish-brown hair covered his body. His face was broad, almost human but not quite, with a heavy brow ridge and a jaw that suggested tremendous strength. He stood at least 8 feet tall, his shoulders wider than any man I had ever seen. He looked directly at me. Not at Dale, who was closest, not at Vernon, who was already raising his rifle. At me. In that moment, something passed between us. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. I can't explain it any better than that. He held my gaze for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds, and in those seconds I understood that this creature, this being, was not an animal to be hunted. He was a person to be known. Then he was gone, melting into the forest with a silence that seemed impossible for something so large. The others hadn't seen him. They were still gaping at the valley, exclaiming over its beauty, speculating about mineral deposits and hidden silver veins. Only I had witnessed that moment of contact. Only I knew what we had truly found. I said nothing. Over the following weeks, I returned to that valley alone. I told my supervisors at the BLM that I was conducting extended surveys, mapping the remote areas that had never been properly documented. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was surveying, cataloging, studying, but not the land. Coda appeared to me on my 3rd solo visit. He emerged from the trees without warning, close enough that I could smell him, a musky, earthy scent that wasn't unpleasant. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to remain still. To show fear would end whatever fragile connection we were building. He studied me for a long time. Then he made a sound, a low vocalization that rose and fell in pitch. I repeated it as best I could. His eyes widened slightly, the first expression I had learned to read, and he made the sound again. I responded. We were talking. The communication that developed between us was rudimentary but real. I left gifts, food mostly, along with small shiny objects that seemed to interest him. He reciprocated. Unusual stones appeared where I had left my offerings. Feathers arranged in patterns that seemed deliberate. Once a piece of carved wood that might have been a crude representation of a human figure. Or maybe I was seeing what I wanted to see. As the summer deepened, I learned more. Coda was not alone. There were others. A female who watched from the shadows, smaller figures that I glimpsed only briefly. Children, I realized. A family, a community. They had been here for generations, perhaps centuries, living in this hidden valley, avoiding contact with humans who had given them every reason to be afraid. And then Coda showed me the caves, deep within the valley, hidden behind a waterfall that seemed to appear from solid rock. A cave system penetrated the mountain. Coda led me inside, carrying a torch that he had fashioned himself, demonstrating a level of tool use that would have rewritten every anthropology textbook ever published. The walls were covered with paintings. I had seen cave paintings before, photographs of Lascaux and Altamira, the prehistoric galleries that had revolutionized our understanding of early human cognition. These were different. These were older, and they told a story that shattered everything I thought I knew about the history of this continent. Humans and Coda's people, living together, hunting together, sharing food and fire and knowledge. The paintings showed them side by side, two different species united in cooperation. Then the images changed, weapons raised, blood spilled. Coda's people retreating into the wilderness, into the high and hidden places, while humans spread across the land below. A betrayal, an ancient wound that had never healed. The last panel showed a single figure of Coda's kind, standing guard over a cave entrance. Inside the cave, symbols that I didn't recognize at first, but then understanding dawned. They weren't protecting silver, they weren't protecting treasure, they were protecting memory. This place, this hidden valley with its paintings and its stories, was a record of everything that had been lost. The knowledge of peaceful coexistence, the possibility of understanding between species, the road not taken by human civilization. Elijah Harrison hadn't found a silver mine in 1891. He had found this, and he had spent the rest of his short life trying to protect it. I understood then why he had created the legend of the Silver Strike, misdirection. If people believed there was treasure to be found, they would search for treasure. They wouldn't look for the real secret, the knowledge that we had once lived in harmony with beings we now called monsters. Harrison had died keeping this secret, and now I carried the same burden. Meanwhile, Galena Ridge was losing its mind. Silver hit $52 an ounce in early July, the highest price in recorded history. What had started as local curiosity exploded into national news. The Idaho Bigfoot Silver Rush, they called it. Reporters arrived from Boise, from Seattle, from New York and Los Angeles. Camera crews set up in front of the Nugget Bar interviewing anyone willing to spin a tale for a few dollars and a moment of fame. Hundreds of outsiders descended on our little town. Amateur prospectors, professional treasure hunters, cryptozoology enthusiasts, grifters, and true believers. They bought every metal detector in a 3-state radius. They stripped the hardware store of camping equipment. They filled every motel room within 50 miles. And they poured into the forest with guns and greed and absolutely no understanding of what they might find. Violence erupted within the first week. A dispute over a claimed campsite left one man in the hospital with a fractured skull. 2 outsiders were arrested for threatening a local family at gunpoint, demanding to see old mining maps. Someone set fire to Benjamin Cross's garage, attempting to destroy his collection of historical documents. The fever had become an epidemic. Dale Whitmore came to my cabin on the evening of July 1st. He didn't knock. He simply walked in, followed by Vernon and Ray Finch, and sat down at my kitchen table as if he owned the place. What he proposed was a serious expedition. No more day trips, no more amateur fumbling around in the woods. He had assembled a team of 11 men, well supplied and well armed, committed to a 2-week systematic search of the entire Clearwater wilderness. He wanted me to serve as guide and surveyor. I refused. I cited my professional obligations, my need for neutrality, a dozen excuses that sounded hollow even as I spoke them. Dale listened patiently, then leaned forward with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He knew people in Washington, he said. people who could make my career with the BLM very comfortable, or very difficult. He mentioned my rental cabin, which happened to be on land his family owned. He wondered aloud whether my survey reports had been properly filed, whether any irregularities might be discovered upon close inspection. The threats were elegant, delivered with small-town politeness and lethal precision. I had underestimated Dale Whitmore. Behind his hardware store respectability lurked a desperate man, and desperate men are capable of anything. I agreed to join the expedition. Charlie Proudfoot caught my arm as I walked to my truck that night. His grip was surprisingly strong for a man his age, and his eyes held a warning that words couldn't convey. He spoke of his grandmother, a Nez Perce elder, who had passed down stories that predated European contact. His people had a name for Coda's kind, Tsimiquis, the forest guardians. They were not animals to be hunted, or monsters to be feared. They were protectors. The next morning I slipped away before dawn. I had to warn Coda. I had to make him understand that danger was coming, that he needed to take his family and flee. My communication skills were limited, but desperation is its own language. I found him waiting for me at the valley entrance, as if he had known I would come. Coda's eyes held something I had never seen before. Not fear exactly, but a profound sadness, as if he had witnessed this moment countless times across generations. I tried desperately to communicate the danger, using every gesture and expression I could muster. "Leave," I pleaded with my hands. "Take your family. Run." But Coda simply stood there, watching me with those ancient, knowing eyes. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and placed one massive hand on my shoulder. The weight was tremendous, yet the touch was impossibly gentle. In that moment, I understood something fundamental about his kind. They did not flee. They had never fled. Through centuries of human encroachment, through the violence and the fear and the hunting parties, they had remained. They endured. They protected. Coda showed me something then. A hidden passage through the mountains, a route that wound through narrow canyons and emerged miles away in wilderness, so remote that no human had likely ever set foot there. An escape route. A gift. But even as he revealed it, I knew he would never use it. Whatever they guarded in that valley, whatever sacred trust they had maintained since before recorded history, it mattered more to them than survival itself. I returned to camp with a heavy heart. The expedition departed at dawn on July 4, 1983. The town threw us a celebration that felt more like a funeral procession. Newspaper reporters snapped photographs. Children waved American flags. The headline in the Galena Ridge Gazette read, "Modern Pioneers Seek Silver Legend." I remember thinking how wrong they had it. We were not pioneers. We were invaders. The first 3 days proceeded according to Dale's meticulous plan. We moved in a systematic grid pattern, covering ground efficiently, documenting everything we found. I did what I could to steer the group away from the hidden valley, suggesting alternative routes, pointing out false leads. But Dale was watching me. He had been watching me for weeks, I realized. He knew I was hiding something. Vernon grew more aggressive with each passing hour. The wilderness seemed to amplify whatever darkness lived inside him. He jumped at shadows, accused everyone of plotting against him, kept his rifle constantly in his hands. Dr. Hennigan tried to maintain scientific objectivity, documenting plant species and geological formations, as if this were an ordinary research expedition. Charlie Proudfoot grew quieter with each mile we traveled, his face troubled by something none of us could see. On the fourth day, Ray Finch found fresh tracks. The prints were unmistakable, 18 inches long, pressed deep into the soft earth beside a mountain stream. The group gathered around them in hushed reverence, as if we had discovered holy relics. Vernon traced the outline with his finger, a strange smile spreading across his face. We followed the tracks to the edge of a steep ravine, and there in the valley below we saw them. Coda stood in a clearing, fully visible in the morning light. Beside him was a smaller figure, a juvenile perhaps 4 feet tall, covered in the same reddish-brown hair. They were foraging, unaware of our presence above them. The juvenile moved with clumsy grace, stumbling over roots while Coda watched with what I can only describe as paternal patience. Vernon raised his rifle. I do not remember making the decision. I simply found myself shouting, my voice tearing through the mountain silence. Coda's head snapped up. The juvenile froze. Vernon's shot cracked through the air, missing by inches as Coda swept the young one behind him. Then they were gone, vanishing into the forest with impossible speed. But Coda's cry echoed through the valley long after he disappeared. It was not the sound of an animal, it was rage and grief and ancient sorrow, all woven together into something that still haunts my dreams. The group turned on me immediately, Dale's face contorted with fury. Vernon looked ready to kill me on the spot. Accusations flew like bullets. I was protecting the beast. I was sabotaging the expedition. I was a traitor to my own kind. Charlie stepped forward to defend me, arguing that we should leave this place, that we had already gone too far. Reverend Emery launched into a sermon about cleansing evil from the land. Marcus Webb calculated the creature's worth as a captured specimen. Millions, he said. Worth millions to the right buyer. They voted 9-2 to continue the hunt. Only Charlie and I dissented. That night the creatures struck back. They attacked not to kill but to terrify. Tents were shredded by unseen claws. Supplies scattered across the mountainside. George Tilden broke his leg fleeing through the darkness. Bobby Finch nearly tumbled off a cliff before I managed to grab his arm. Through it all, not a single person was seriously harmed. The message was clear. Leave this place. You do not belong here. But Vernon Skaggs had passed beyond reason. In the gray light of dawn he declared martial law over the expedition. Dale was too shaken to resist. Vernon took command with the cold efficiency of his military training. George could not walk on his shattered leg. We left him at camp with supplies and a promise to return. Vernon's orders were simple. We would not leave without proof, without a body. Charlie and I planned our escape that afternoon. We would slip away after dark, make our way back to town, contact the authorities. The expedition had become a death march, and we wanted no part of what was coming. But Ray Finch caught us packing our bags. He held us at gunpoint while Vernon decided our fate. We were not permitted to leave. We were prisoners now, conscripts in a war against creatures who had done nothing but exist. Vernon forced me to lead them to the valley. He knew. Somehow he had pieced together my secret trips, my strange behavior, my desperate warning shout. He pressed his rifle against my spine and gave me a choice. Lead them to the creatures, or die here and now on this mountainside. I had no options left. I led them to the hidden valley. Even Vernon fell silent when we emerged from the narrow canyon entrance. The valley spread before us like something from a dream. Pristine meadows carpeted with wildflowers. A crystal stream catching sunlight like scattered diamonds. Ancient trees standing sentinel around a cave entrance on the far side. This was no ordinary place. You could feel it in your bones, in the very air you breathed. Something sacred dwelt here. Dr. Hennigan examined the cave walls with trembling hands. The paintings were thousands of years old, he whispered. Maybe tens of thousands. They depicted humans and Coda's kind living together, sharing food, raising children side by side. Then came darker images. Humans with weapons, creatures falling, a great exodus into the mountains. A sacred trust being established. A promise to protect and remember. Charlie wept openly. This is a holy place, he said. We should not be here, we have no right. Ray had wandered deeper into the cave, searching for the treasure that had driven us all to this moment. He emerged with mineral samples, his face twisted with confusion. He ran chemical tests from our supplies. No silver. The deposits were worthless commercially. Unusual, yes. Beautiful, certainly. But worth nothing on any market. Vernon's sanity, what remained of it, shattered completely. 92 years of legend, he screamed. All this way for nothing. His rifle swung toward the cave entrance, toward something none of us had noticed. Coda stood there, alone, unarmed, his hands open at his sides. He had come to meet us, to face whatever we intended, to protect his family one final time. Vernon raised his weapon. I threw myself at him, grasping for the rifle barrel. The gun discharged wild, the shot echoing off ancient stone. Then Coda moved. I have never seen anything so large move so fast. One moment Vernon was taking aim. The next the rifle was sailing through the air, and Vernon was suspended in Coda's grip, feet dangling above the ground. I thought Coda would kill him. We all did. Vernon certainly did. His screaming stopped abruptly as he stared into those ancient eyes. Something passed between them in that moment. Vernon saw himself, truly saw himself, reflected in the gaze of a being who had watched humanity for longer than our recorded history. When Coda set him down, Vernon collapsed into the dirt, sobbing like a child. More creatures emerged from the tree line. The female I had glimpsed before, 2 juveniles pressing close to her legs, and an elder, ancient even by their standards, moving slowly with the weight of countless years. The elder approached Charlie, reached out with one weathered hand, and touched his face with infinite tenderness. Charlie spoke in Nez Perce, the language of his grandmother, of his ancestors. The elder responded in kind, impossible but true. Through Charlie's translation, the truth finally emerged. The truth that Elijah Harrison had discovered and died protecting. The truth that had drawn us all to this place. "We watched your kind discover fire," Charlie repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "We taught your ancestors which plants heal. We hid when you chose violence over wisdom. We have been waiting for you to remember what matters, not silver, not wealth, connection, the land, each other. We guard this place because it remembers. If this memory dies, humanity loses something it cannot replace." We emerged from the wilderness 5 days later, changed in ways that words cannot capture. George was recovered from the camp, his leg beginning to heal. Our cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned. Our equipment was lost to a flash flood that never actually occurred. The official report stated that the expedition failed to locate any evidence of unusual fauna or mineral deposits. The legend we declared was merely a legend. The 11 of us made a pact that day: we would never speak of what we truly found. We would protect the secret as Elijah Harrison had protected it before us, and we would carry the weight of that knowledge for the rest of our lives. Vernon Skaggs checked himself into a VA psychiatric facility the following month. Whatever he saw in Coda's eyes broke something inside him, and he never spoke of the expedition again. Dale Whitmore sold his store, moved to Oregon, and spent his remaining years advocating for wilderness preservation. He never explained his conversion to those who knew him. Ray Finch was found dead 6 months later. The coroner ruled it suicide. His note contained a single line: "I cannot forget what I almost did." His brother Bobby took a different path. He became a forest ranger in the Clearwater National Forest, serving 35 years before retirement. He walked those woods every day, and I believe he kept watch over that hidden valley until the very end. Dr. Hennigan published an anonymous paper about theoretical hominid intelligence. Academia dismissed it as fantasy. Marcus Webb turned himself in for embezzlement, served his time, and emerged an honest man. Charlie Proudfoot returned to the Nez Perce reservation and became an elder himself, carrying forward the old stories with new reverence. Reverend Emery left the ministry entirely, saying only that he had been wrong about the nature of evil. George Tilden withdrew from politics, his ambitions extinguished by whatever he experienced during those terrible days. "I am 84 years old now. The others are all gone, taken by time and circumstance. I am the last keeper of this secret, and I have decided that it should not die with me, not entirely. The exact location of that valley will go to my grave, but the truth, the real truth about what we found there, deserves to be told. There are things in this world older than humanity, wiser than humanity. They have watched us grow from frightened apes into builders of cities, and they have mourned our every wrong turn. They do not hate us for our violence. They grieve for us. They wait with patience beyond our comprehension for us to remember what matters. 41 years ago, I looked into the eyes of a creature that should not exist, and I saw reflected there everything humanity could become. We are capable of such beauty, such connection, such love, but we are also capable of unspeakable greed, of destruction beyond measure. The choice, as it has always been, is ours.